Chapter 4 The Wonderful Practice of Nonattachment. The Buddha said to Subhuti, "Furthermore, a bodhisattva, a great being, should give rise to a mind that does not abide in forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations, or dharmas. A bodhisattva should cultivate a mind that does not abide anywhere. Subhuti, when a bodhisattva practices generosity, their mind should not abide in the notion of a self, a person, a being, or a lifespan. Subhuti, a bodhisattva should practice generosity without abiding in appearances. Why? If a bodhisattva practices generosity without abiding in appearances, the merit they gain is immeasurable." Subhuti, what do you think? Is the space in the eastern direction measurable? Subhuti replied, "No, world-honored one, it is not." The Buddha said, "Likewise, is the space in the southern, western, northern directions, or the space in the intermediate directions, the zenith or the nadir, measurable?" Subhuti replied, "No, world-honored one, it is not." The Buddha said, "Similarly, when a bodhisattva practices generosity without abiding in appearances, the merit they gain is immeasurable. Subhuti, a bodhisattva should abide in the teachings I have explained in order to give rise to this mind." The Practice of Nonattachment. The word practice is the practice of cultivation in Buddhism, particularly the practice of the Dharma. This refers to what we previously discussed about generosity, which is an internal effort. Generally, generosity is divided into internal and external generosity. In Chinese Zen, there is a phrase that became popular later on, "let go." This phrase represents generosity, letting go of everything. The most difficult thing in life is to truly let go, and when you truly let go, it is true generosity. Letting go is internal generosity. Once internal generosity is achieved, one can attain accomplishment and reach the path. Here, the Buddha tells Subhuti about the method of internal generosity. Here, furthermore, means secondary, lower in quality and importance. What is the highest guidance Buddha said? Do we remember what the Buddha first said? Subhuti asked how to abide and how to subdue one's mind. The Buddha simply responded, "Abide in this way, subdue the mind in this way." This is equivalent to saying nothing. That represents the highest principle. The highest principle is difficult to understand. Let's try to comprehend with a story. In the novel Journey to the West, where the Tang monk, Tripitaka, goes to India to obtain the scriptures. When he meets the Buddha asks the Venerable Kasyapa, his chief disciple, to give them the highest scriptures because they have come all the way from the East, from China, and have worked very hard, so their merit is complete. When Tang monk and his 3 disciples arrive at the library to retrieve the scriptures, the gatekeeper asks for a bribe. Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, gets angry and raises his staff to hit him. Tang monk says, "Don't resort to violence. This is the final step. Otherwise all our hard work will be in vain. We don't have money, but we have a monk's robe. Let's pawn it and give him the bribe." Sun Wukong, frustrated and angry, reluctantly agrees. Kasyapa, feeling embarrassed, is often depicted in temples with his head bowed. When they finally obtain the scriptures and arrive at the temple gate, Sun Wukong argues with his master, saying the old monk cannot be trusted and insists on opening the scriptures. When they do, they find that the scriptures are just blank sheets of paper with no words written on them. Sun Wukong makes a big fuss and the Buddha hears about it. He asks Kasyapa, who explains, "You instructed me to give them the highest scriptures, so I gave them the best." The Buddha responds, "Oh, they won't understand a scripture with no words. Go and exchange it for one with words, the lower quality ones." So, furthermore refers to something of slightly lower quality, the scripture with words. The true highest scriptures require no words at all. They are fundamentally empty. Abide in this way, subdue the mind in this way is the highest principle, just like a blank sheet of paper. Non-attachment. The Buddha tells Subhuti, "Let me tell you how a true practitioner should practice. A bodhisattva should practice without abiding in any dharma, and that's it. The mind should be without attachment at all times and in all places. If your mind is constantly attached to emptiness, you are already mistaken because you are abiding in emptiness. If your mind abides in light or in the energy channels, it is still mistaken because that is not non-abiding. A bodhisattva should practice generosity without attachment, meaning that in practice, one should empty the mind at every moment, let go of everything. If something arises, respond to it. Once it passes, do not hold on to it. Even if you do a good deed, once it is done, it should be forgotten, with nothing lingering in the mind. If you do not hold on to good deeds in your heart, you naturally will not do bad deeds. Everywhere and at all times, one should practice generosity without attachment. For example, if today someone criticizes you and you are so angry that you cannot sleep for 3 days, then you are already attached to that anger. If today someone gives you a dirty look and you lose sleep over it, then you are already attached to that person's gaze. One should be without attachment in any situation. If you look in one direction, it passes by like a dream. If you turn back to look in another direction, the previous direction will have passed by like a dream as well. However, we often fail to let go. We can never truly let go. The dog hasn't been fed. Husband hasn't come home yet. All these concerns should be left aside. Practice generosity without attachment, and generosity means letting go of everything. The following explains what it means to practice generosity without attachment to forms. Non-attachment to forms. What are forms? In Buddhist philosophy, forms are categorized into visible forms, invisible forms, subtle forms, and vast forms. Visible forms refer to the colors and shapes in the world: green, yellow, blue, white, black, as well as long, short, tall, short, etc., which can be expressed externally. This includes material objects like earth, water, fire, and wind, as well as our physical bodies, which are all part of visible forms. Invisible forms belong to the realm of the mind. They are abstract and cannot be expressed physically. For example, we all know about atomic energy, but what is that energy exactly? To be honest, unless one formally studies physics or science, most people don't really understand it. Energy itself is empty, and because it is empty, its power is immeasurable. In the end, even scientific instruments cannot detect it, but we know it is there, and this is called invisible form. Subtle forms are like atoms and nuclei, so small that they are almost invisible. They can still be observed through scientific instruments, so they are called subtle forms. Vast forms refer to the enormous scale of the universe. Extending far beyond the Milky Way system, encompassing all things in the universe, and are called vast forms. These are the forms of matter. Simply put, forms include the four elements: earth, water, fire, and wind, which also constitute our bodies. The Buddha teaches that a bodhisattva should practice generosity without attachment to forms, meaning that one should not be attached to material objects when practicing generosity. If you do a good deed, donate some money, or help someone, and then think, "I have helped someone," that is practicing generosity with attachment to forms. Those who truly study Buddhism should help others without feeling that there is any material object involved. The idea of objects should be discarded, with no thought lingering in the mind. The merit gained from practicing generosity with good intentions is known as merit of human and heavenly blessings, which is a small reward compared to the great merit of practicing Buddhism. There is a significant difference between merit and virtue. The Diamond Sutra focuses on merit, not on virtue. What is the greatest merit in life? Awakening and achieving the path. Wisdom is the greatest blessing in life, and the realization of wisdom is not ordinary knowledge. In terms of our practice, when we sit quietly with our eyes closed, whether reciting the Buddha's name, meditating, or chanting mantras, if we are attached to our physical body during these practices, we are practicing generosity with attachment to forms. We may say that we want to let go, but in reality, we are unable to do so. If we feel discomfort in our legs while sitting, it is because our mind is attached to the body. If we can let go of attachment to the body, the discomfort will disappear, and we won't feel any pain in our legs. This is because all beings are attached to forms during practice, while a bodhisattva practices generosity without attachment to this physical body, letting go of everything, including the body itself. Non-attachment to sounds, smells, tastes, and touch. Non-attachment to sounds, smells, tastes, touch means that some practitioners, when they progress in their practice, may hear sounds or smell fragrances and think they have attained realization, but in the end, they do not achieve realization and instead suffer mental disturbances. Indeed, some practitioners have gone so far that they entered into a mental state from which they never returned because they did not understand the principle of non-attachment to sounds. Some practitioners, while meditating, may suddenly experience the scent of sandalwood, even though there is no actual sandalwood around. This scent arises from within, as the practitioner's inner state becomes pure and bright, emitting a fragrance. In fact, every healthy person does not emit an odor, and their saliva does not smell bad, but rather has a unique scent of its own. As mentioned in Journey to the West, once someone is around, even the monsters can smell the scent of humans and are eager to consume them. Just like when we enter a pigsty, we can smell the pigs, or when we enter a doghouse, we can smell the dogs. When celestial beings come to our world, they can smell human scent and find it unbearable. I've had this experience too. After living in the mountains for 3 years, when I came down and was still about 5 or 6 miles away from the city, I could hardly bear the smell of humans. Even though I am human too, having been accustomed to living in the mountains, far from other people, the smell of people overwhelmed me once I came down. It took a long time to get used to it again. Those who study medicine know that the human body is not inherently dirty. But when internal substances come into contact with external air and bacteria, they immediately produce an odor. When we sit in meditation and the body emits a fragrance, if we think we have accumulated great merit and are smelling the scent of the bodhisattvas, then we are attached to the scent, and that is not right. We should remain unattached and let it go. The inner bliss of the bodhisattva. Touch, hong, is very important, especially for those who practice diligently. When one practices well, they may experience a sense of inner bliss in their body that they have never felt before. The precepts for bodhisattvas do not permit them to indulge in this state, as attachment to such blissful states may prevent them from helping others. Who wouldn't want to enjoy this inner bliss? No one would be willing to give lectures or help others. Therefore, the bodhisattva path includes experiencing inner bliss through touch. But a true practitioner of Mahayana Buddhism should not be attached to this state. They should practice generosity without attachment. Dharma refers to the mental realm, the domain of thoughts, ideas, and consciousness. If you still cling to the idea of emptiness, then you are already stuck in the realm of Dharma. Therefore, once you have let go of everything external and emptied your consciousness, you can then begin to truly study Buddhism, practicing generosity without attachment to forms, sounds, smells, tastes, touch. This is the correct way to practice, according to the Buddha. At this point, the Buddha again calls out, "Subhuti, let me tell you." The Buddha's tone is affectionate, like a parent calling to their child. He is saying, "My child, let me explain further." The passing of the wild goose. Through the sky. Subhuti, a bodhisattva should practice generosity in this way without being attached to appearances. Why? Because if a bodhisattva practices generosity without attachment, their merit will be immeasurable. A true practitioner of the Mahayana Bodhisattva path should practice generosity in this way, without attachment to any appearance. If there is even a trace of attachment in the mind, then it is no longer the path of the Buddha. We can use Chinese literature to describe this. The wind passes through the bamboo, and the wild goose flies through the sky. It's like the wind blowing through a bamboo forest. The wind passes through the leaves without lingering on them. The wind is gone, and the bamboo remains unaffected. A practitioner's mind should be like this. Similarly, when a bird flies through the sky, it leaves no trace behind. This is the attitude and realm of a bodhisattva, which is called internal generosity. Su Dongpo has a famous poem that also comes from Buddhist teachings. Life is like a wild goose treading in the snow. The snow leaves a trace of its claws, but the wild goose flies away, no longer caring about east or west. He says that life is like a bird stepping in the snow, leaving a claw print. When the bird flies away, snow falls again, covering the print. The bird left no trace and continued on its way. People say they want to establish a family, have children and grandchildren. But when you close your eyes and open your hands at the end of your life, nothing is left. This is Su Dongpo's famous line, and it reflects the same principle as the wind passes through the bamboo and the wild goose flies through the sky, meaning that a bodhisattva should not be attached to appearances. Recently, I have noticed that young people are particularly enthusiastic about studying Buddhism and cultivating the path, which worries me. I often talk to young students and ask, Why are you so keen on studying Buddhism at such a young age? You shouldn't feel discouraged by my words, as they carry two meanings. First, the world has many things that are easy to learn, but learning Buddhism is the hardest of all. Second, life is like trying to draw a tiger and ending up with a dog. If you don't succeed in studying Buddhism, who knows what you might turn into? So, I hope you first complete the task of living your life before you embark on studying Buddhism. But if you do choose to study Buddhism, make sure you keep in mind the principle of non-attachment to appearances. If you are attached to appearances, nothing can be achieved. Merit and virtue. We just discussed the importance of non-attachment to appearances. The Buddha then says, why? Because if a bodhisattva practices generosity without attachment, their merit will be immeasurable. Here, the Buddha mentions merit. He says that if a Mahayana bodhisattva practices generosity without attachment, the merit they gain will be so great that it cannot be measured. Merit is not the same as virtue. Virtue is accumulated through effort and time, bit by bit, like building a project, where daily progress accumulates into a completed work. When the work is completed, the resulting benefit is called virtue. Merit, on the other hand, is different. Merit is broadly divided into two types. Worldly merit, called great fortune in literature, which pertains to worldly matters, and pure merit, which belongs to the transcendent realm. Pure merit is even more difficult to achieve than worldly merit, and it is harder for people to enjoy. However, most people, when they reach the stage of enjoying pure merit, fear solitude and coldness, which is unfortunate. This is due to attachment, caused by the presence of self and others. When people see their children grow up and leave the country, they find themselves alone, watching television or sitting with their spouse, shedding tears. This quiet and peaceful state is actually the best time of life, but because they are attached to the changing phenomena of the world, they feel that everything is wrong when these phenomena change. Some students who have worked with me often say, I think the most pitiful person is the teacher. I say, yes, I can't even find 1 second of peace and it's very pitiful. I can't even get 1 minute of pure merit. But when people truly have the opportunity to enjoy pure merit, they often do not realize that this is the ultimate blessing that has come to them. In fact, when there is nothing to worry about and everything is clear and clean, that is the ultimate blessing. If you ask, what is the greatest blessing in life? The answer is, of course, attaining Buddhahood, transcending the ordinary, and entering sainthood. What does it take to transcend the ordinary and enter sainthood? It requires the realization of wisdom, not the accumulation of virtue. It's not about superstition. It's about letting go of everything to achieve the realization of wisdom. So the Buddha tells Subhuti that if someone can practice generosity without attachment to appearances, their merit will be immeasurable. This merit is so great that it is beyond imagination. It cannot be thought about, nor can it be measured. Subhuti, what do you think? The space in the east, extending infinitely in that direction, can you measure its size? Subhuti answers, no, world-honored one. Subhuti, what about the space in the south, west, north, and in the intermediate directions, the zenith and the nadir? Can it be measured? No, world-honored one. The Buddha asks about the space in the south, west, north, the intermediate directions, the zenith and the nadir, and Subhuti answers, no, world-honored one. There is no way to measure it. East, south, west, north, up, and down are called the 6 directions. Can the space in the 6 directions be measured? Subhuti answers, no, world-honored one. One sentence would be enough. However, in the original texts, it would have been, Subhuti, what do you think? Can the space in the east be measured? No, world-honored one. What do you think? Can the space in the south be measured? No, world-honored one. The Great Prajna Sutra has 600 volumes, and if you read it all, it would be overwhelming. But the Diamond Sutra has been condensed by Master Kumarajiva, giving it a different literary flavor. But don't forget, why does it start with the eastern space? Why not start with the western space, like in the Amitabha Sutra? The Medicine Buddha Sutra and the Diamond Sutra start with the east, while the practice of the instant achievement method in the Vajrayana starts with the north, and the Great Light practice mentions only the south. So when studying Buddhism, these are all issues to consider. Don't just focus on the 5 aggregates, the 18 elements, and the 18 emptinesses, which are about form is not different from emptiness, emptiness is not different from form, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, which keeps circling back to the same concepts. Buddhas of the East and West. The East is traditionally associated with vitality and life force, which is why if one seeks longevity, they should recite the name of the Medicine Buddha of the Eastern Pure Land, Lapis Lazuli Light. The Medicine Buddha presides over the Eastern Pure Land, which is concerned with the aspects of life and its continuation. In contrast, the Western Pure Land, associated with Amitabha Buddha, is more focused on the final destination or the end of life. The Eastern worldview is one of endless regeneration, reflecting the broader cultural philosophy of continuous rebirth. The scriptures in the exoteric teachings contain many hidden truths that require deep contemplation and investigation. If you think you understand and only consider the directions as merely east, south, west, and north, why then do we not say south, north, east, west? There is a reason why the east is mentioned first, followed by the south, west, and north, with the 4 cardinal directions and the zenith, and nadir being mentioned last. Delving into this involves many profound insights, all of which are related to the principles of spiritual practice. For those who aspire to study Buddhism and practice, one must first embrace the vitality of the East, the life force. Only by activating this vital energy, transforming the physical body, can one achieve concentration and attain true bliss. The symbol representing this is in the East, which is considered the direction of life force, like the rising sun. Why then do we recite the Amitabha Sutra and focus on the West? The setting sun, the sunset is beautiful but fleeting, signaling that it is time to think about returning home, to focus on the West. These teachings are not arbitrarily chosen. They have deep significance in Buddhism. Subhuti, bodhisattvas should give without attachment to form. The merit from such giving is immeasurable. Subhuti, bodhisattvas should abide as I have instructed. This is the Buddha's stern admonition. He tells Subhuti that a true practitioner of Buddhism must practice giving without attachment to any form. But why should people practice giving and compassion? In traditional Chinese culture, it is said, what one ought to do out of righteousness. Helping others and showing compassion are simply the right things to do. The merit from giving without attachment is vast, as boundless as space. Subhuti, remember that a practitioner of the Mahayana Bodhisattva path should practice as I have instructed, with a mind free from attachment. That is true practice. Some people are gloomy all day, and it is wrong to dwell in gloom. Others are aimless and wandering, which is also wrong. It is incorrect to be attached to anything. Instead, one should respond to circumstances as they arise and let them go without attachment. This is the practice of the Mahayana Bodhisattva path. This is why the fifth patriarch of Zen Buddhism instructed the sixth patriarch to first study the Diamond Sutra. The method of practice is to be free from all attachments, which is the most fundamental and ultimate practice of Mahayana Buddhism. However, there is one important point to note. When we study the Diamond Sutra and its teachings on wisdom, prajna, we must be careful not to mistakenly think that the Diamond Sutra is about emptiness. The Diamond Sutra does not teach emptiness in any of its verses. It uses space as a metaphor, and the idea that the Diamond Sutra teaches emptiness is incorrect. The Diamond Sutra teaches non-attachment. Non-attachment is not the same as emptiness. Non-attachment is like flowing water or drifting clouds. Things move continuously without stopping, but they still exist and continue to flow. This is a key point. In Chapter 4, the Buddha teaches us a method of practice. To understand the true Dharma, one must be unattached but not indifferent. Bodhisattvas should abide as instructed. This is how one should practice. The second important point is that true non-attachment leads to the fulfillment of merit. We know that doing business requires 3 types of capital. The initial capital to start, the capital tied up in receivables and payables, and the working capital. However, in Buddhism, only 2 types of capital are needed: the capital of wisdom and the capital of merit. These 2 are essential for the practice of Buddhism and are what we refer to as the dual cultivation of wisdom and merit. Wisdom, hui, refers to spiritual insight, while merit, fu, refers to the blessings and good fortune one accumulates. A person who possesses both wisdom and merit is truly on the path to Buddhahood. Some people have great merit, wealth, and fame, but lack wisdom. Others are wise, but live in poverty and lack worldly success. The Buddha's path is the culmination of both wisdom and merit, known as the dual cultivation of wisdom and merit. The phrase, the twofold refuge in the Buddha, refers to this dual completeness in wisdom and merit. The Diamond Sutra teaches that true merit is achieved through giving without attachment. King Ashokas Sand. There is a story in the Buddhist scriptures about King Ashoka, who lived 100 years after the Buddha's passing. In his youth, Ashoka did not believe in Buddhism, but later in life, he became a devout follower. He built 84,000 stupas during his lifetime, and one of these stupas flew to China after the Tang dynasty, eventually landing in the Ayuwang Temple in Ningbo, Zhejiang. This stupa contained relics of the Buddha, making the temple itself also known as Ayuwang Temple. The famous historical event where Alexander the Great invaded India and met King Ashoka is well known. During Ashoka's time, there was a great arhat named Upagupta who was a close friend of the king. According to the Ashoka Sutra, one day, while the Buddha was out begging for alms, he encountered 2 children playing in the sand. When they saw the Buddha, they were filled with respect and saw him holding a bowl. One child took a handful of sand and offered it to the Buddha, saying, "I offer this to you." The Buddha replied, "Good, good." The other child, also full of sincerity, joined in the offering. The Buddha then predicted that 100 years later, one of them would become a great king, and the other a prime minister. King Ashoka was that child who offered the sand. However, because he offered sand, he suffered from a skin disease that made his skin itch for his entire life. Historically, many people have suffered similar ailments. In the late Qing dynasty, the famous general Zheng Guofan, who achieved great success, also suffered from skin disease. It was rumored that he was a giant snake in a past life, and his skin would peel off in large patches due to the itching. King Ashoka too endured this suffering throughout his life, even though he was a great king of India. He loved to give alms, build temples, and help the poor in society, but in doing so, he nearly emptied the national treasury. When he was lying on his deathbed, he still wanted to give alms. His ministers told the crown prince that he could no longer allow his father to give away the kingdom's wealth, or there would be nothing left when he took the throne. As a result, they blocked Ashoka's orders to give alms. Knowing this, Ashoka felt deeply saddened but was helpless. One day, while eating a pear, he gathered his son and ministers and asked, "Who holds the greatest power in the world today?" The crown prince and prime minister knelt and replied, "Of course, your majesty, you hold the greatest power." Ashoka responded, "You deceive me. I may have power, but it only extends to half a pear. I cannot even command you to give alms, so I will give this half a pear as my final offering." His ministers had no choice but to comply and took the half pear in a golden dish to the temple. When the great Arhat heard this, he knew what had happened. He ordered the temple bells to be rung, and the entire assembly gathered, donned their robes, and went to the temple gate to welcome King Ashoka's final offering. The Arhat received the half pear, announcing that this was King Ashoka's last offering. Unable to divide it among everyone, they cooked a large pot of porridge and added the pear so that everyone could share in the merit. After Ashoka's death, the Arhat also passed away, saying he had fulfilled his purpose. This story illustrates the concept of merit. The offering of sand by the young King Ashoka was a spontaneous act of giving without attachment. If we were to emulate Ashoka by offering something to the Buddha with the hope of becoming a great king in the next life, it would not work because it would be done with attachment. The child's offering of sand was as sincere as if it were gold, an act of pure intention without attachment, and thus it was a truly meritorious deed. The Broom of Chuda Pantha. Another story from the Buddhist scriptures is about Chuda Pantha, a disciple of the Buddha. He was so slow-witted that he could not even recite the simplest mantras, such as Amitabha Buddha. The Buddha finally told him to simply recite the word "sweep broom." But Chuda Pantha would forget broom as soon as he remembered sweep and vice versa. It took him many years just to remember these two words. However, he attained great spiritual powers and even saved the Buddha's life on several occasions. Once, when the Buddha was in danger from a mountain being thrown at him by an evil force, Chuda Pantha simply pointed at the mountain and it was pushed away. His spiritual power, developed through the simple practice of sweeping, was immense. The Buddha recounted that when Chuda Pantha first came to seek ordination, he was already old. The senior disciples, including Ananda, Subhuti, and Shariputra, did not want to ordain him because they observed that he had not accumulated any merit in his past 500 lives, meaning he had no connection with the Buddha. The Buddha scolded them, saying, "You are all so focused on becoming arhats and only seeing the past 500 lives. Do you know what he was before that? 500 lives ago, he was a dog who had a karmic connection with me. This dog once went to a place where it ate excrement. The latrine was a hanging type where excrement dropped down a considerable distance. The dog, eating its fill, was startled when a large piece of excrement fell on its tail. Frightened, it ran away and saw an ancient stupa, a relic of a solitary Buddha. The dog, needing to urinate, lifted its tail, and the excrement fell off, landing on the stupa. The Buddha said, that was his offering to me, which created a karmic connection. That stupa was the relic of a Pratyeka Buddha. So you see, it was no coincidence. For the dog, excrement was like braised pork belly to us, a delicacy. Offering its best, it made an unintentional, non-attached offering, and thus its merit was immeasurable. The Buddha said that because of this karmic connection, Chuda Pantha could now be ordained. Even after becoming a monk, Chuda Pantha was still assigned menial tasks because of his simplicity. The Buddha instructed him to sweep the floors and chant Broom as he swept. After many years of practice, he too attained enlightenment. Spiritual practice is like using a broom to sweep away the mental dust of distractions and attachments. The principle of non-attachment in giving is like the broom. You must sweep away all the delusions in your mind. Practicing this way, as instructed, leads to the state of non-attachment in every moment, which is the true practice of Buddhism. This is Chapter 4, the section on wondrous practice without abiding.